Good morning. Welcome, everyone. We have Yonah Weiss, Wise Advice podcast that had I think 10,000 plus downloads. And, you run the founder and you run the Real Estate Connections virtual meetup every Wednesday. This is a great opportunity to have you. And I know a little bit about your background because, we've shared a podcast together on my other show, but David doesn't. So what I'd like to do is kind of just, let everybody know this is Let's Get to the Point. Co-host is David H. Evans, and I'm Jona Lemons. And of course, Yonah Weiss here. You can find us on LinkedIn. We're very active and engaging and ready to connect and make things happen. And if you are on LinkedIn or any social media platforms, you can find us. Apple Podcasts, Anchor.fm, YouTube, all the good stuff. So take us there, Yonah. How did this all start 6-7 months ago with COVID? And share with us you're coming from California and then moving to the East Coast.
It's well, let's take about one piece at a time. I think the greatest thing, I think the most relevant thing right now is just understanding we're all in this together, and the current situation, you're just talking about how we're all in Zoom life now. It's crazy. And a good friend of mine wrote an article about how to have proper Zoom etiquette. And part of it was well, hey, if your kids come in the room, don't try to shoo them out. Be a normal person and be yes, this is my daughter.
Right.
I'm on a call now. I'll get to you in, whatever time. But so for me, I love networking. Love to go to, live networking events, conferences, all that stuff. And when I saw, in March, April, that it was out, I was in Texas, in Dallas in March, literally right before, travel bans set in. And I was okay, well, we need to do something. We can't just sit around here. And I saw someone had a virtual meetup and I attended. A friend of mine had a virtual real estate meetup. He's we do this every month in person, but we can't. So we're going to do it online, Zoom this time. Hey, that's such a great idea. Literally the next day, I started this Real Estate Connections, Facebook group and started see how can I pull my network together and do the same exact thing. And so that's what we're doing. We're trying to just bring people together in the real estate industry to do networking, to continue that, meet new people, hear great speakers, and just continue learning, continue growing. And that's really what life's all about. So we should not be confined to to not going out and doing that just because we can't necessarily go out and travel and meet people in conferences, etc.
So it started on Facebook, not necessarily right on LinkedIn, as you mentioned.
Well, it did start on Facebook, on LinkedIn and Facebook kind of simultaneously. I started that Facebook group just at that time, but I started the I put the business page and just started the meetup, literally just put it out there, do it weekly, and got some awesome speakers lined up and just, just went out of the starting gate with a bang. And I think it's been a lot of fun. I have now, regularly anywhere from 40 to 100 people coming every week, and new people every week are coming down. So it's a lot of fun. You get to meet a lot of interesting people. And like you said, just, networking and sharing those experiences.
So that's an interesting, take before COVID, kind of seeing what other people are doing and kind of gave you that idea. So it was a blessing in disguise, I would say, to a lot of people I talk to. What I appreciate about you, Yonah, is you have such a great personality, even when you don't see the video. I had a really nice compliment about you on my podcast. And basically, he's going to come on as a podcast guest and was, basically using you as an example. I want to do that. So I just want to, kind of, share that compliment with you. But, as far as, coming from California and now you're there, you're doing cost segregation. That's your specialty. And you're now a multifamily investor going into this syndication space. Take us there and share with our fellow Californians like how that was like for you to transition to the East Coast.
Yeah, well, I mean, I never really liked California that much, to tell you the truth. So, no
You didn't like the
offense.
sunshine. You didn't like the
No
sunshine.
offense. I love the
Yeah.
sunshine, love the weather, but the, just, I don't know, just kind of the mindset and the things like that. It just wasn't for me. A lot of things about it, but you go where you go where you're drawn to, and I was drawn for whatever reason to different places in the world, and
No, I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to thank you for how tactful you are. Even when you're hosting your own show or you're on somebody else's show, you're very tactful. You've had, on your show some people that have been considered divisive at times, and I won't get too far off in the weeds with that. But you're always very tactful on how you approach questions, whether you necessarily agree with a position or not. And that's something I definitely admire.
right. No, thank you. I appreciate that. It's
And that's
something
hard to
that
do. That's hard to
it's
do.
hard to
Like,
do. It is, and I think it's just come with experience more than anything. Just in my life in general, I'm more of a kind of a peacemaker type person, and I'm open to hearing different opinions, and I'm definitely open to having a constructive debate on different topics. I don't go out of my way to find them, I kind of stay away from them. But if it comes up, I'm happy to hear different opinions and not not try to knock down other people for their own opinions. So I do appreciate that. It does take time and energy and just experience to do something like that. But and so yeah, I don't have anything against California per se. My family, my parents still live in the valley and go back to visit frequently. But real estate in California is very difficult, as you guys know. It's hard, especially now. It's hard to find deals. It's hard to find. People have made it. People have done it. I know plenty of people who have made a lot of money in real estate in California and continue to do so. But for me, I started getting into real estate investing and multifamily, specifically syndications, because again, it just all comes back to the network, right? The people that I was interacting with. And because of the position that I'm in with cost segregation, it's such an incredible position, because what it allows me to do is have this incredible relationship with my clients who are, I'm talking hundreds of people across the country in all different markets doing different things. Some are doing multifamily, some self-storage, some office, industrial, you name it, everything. But what I see is I'm literally tapped into every single market in the entire country and every asset class. And I'm seeing the people that are doing deals, and I'm because once they buy a property, they're calling me up. Like that's pretty like clockwork. So I got very close to a lot of people, and through that, kind of vicariously understood that this is something that I can do and I should do because other people are doing it. So why not? My struggle has been, and I continue to struggle with this, is that I kind of need that kind of control. Like I like to do things. It's hard for me to pass off to other people to do things. And so for me to get into a real estate deal, I need to be, in there, involved.
the hands-on.
Hands-on, exactly.
So you
So for
couldn't
me,
just do a silent like LP type, you wanna roll your sleeves up.
Young, I want to ask, where do you find the bandwidth? First of all, I mean, as someone who's been actively involved in, multifamily management, especially definitely on the smaller side, of course, but I've been in that space, and it took a great deal of bandwidth. I mean, having to, you know, essentially have to take care of, repairs, overlooking your property management company, overlooking maintenance man contractors, dealing with tenant issues directly. It takes an incredible amount of bandwidth. And to be honest, that's why I'm exiting from that, because being actively involved in a multifamily asset is very time intensive, and you have a lot going on. So how do you?
absolutely. It's difficult, and that's probably one of the biggest challenges. But I would say with larger multifamily properties, which is what I'm focused on now, you don't have a lot of that kind of day-to-day. I mean, you have full-time property managers who are dealing with all that kind of day-to-day stuff, but at the same time, And obviously you need to find those trusted partners to do that with. But at the same time, you have there's still a lot more to be involved with in terms of running, the asset management, in terms of finding the deals, finding investors, if you're going that direction. So for me, that's been my biggest struggle because I want to be more involved, and I have so much else going on my plate currently that I'm very happy with. And to be honest, like I love the idea of having more multiple income streams and investing in different deals to do that. But at the same time, I'm very happy with what I'm doing, and I enjoy it so much that it's hard for me to take away any time from that to go into that. So it's really currently that's my biggest struggle.
That's interesting. That's interesting because I know you're quite entrepreneurial, with your approach. So you're right. Like that's the big challenge, right? It's like when you love to do what you're doing in your day career, how do you transition full blown, like whether you're in real estate or another business? That's one of the challenges I've seen a lot of people go through in the past like 2 years, even in my own business consultancy. Like they literally struggle. It's like, well, I like doing this, but I really see the opportunity in this. And it's the clarity, right? It's getting clear, like your why. Why do you want to do that? And like you said, if you're happy, I mean, I can relate. My husband's the same. He's in the tech space, but he loves real estate. He loves anything finance and real estate, but it's so hard for him to just leave that and fully immerse himself. So it's so relatable, like, and to David's point, it's like, where do you find the bandwidth? I think most of us as professionals are trying to like figure out 2021, right? We're like, where is the bandwidth? Like virtual events, making calls, right? Setting appointments, doing podcasts like this. So we definitely appreciate your time and everybody that's come on the show, because that's not an easy thing to schedule, in reality. Like, let's all be honest. I look at my calendar and I'm like, where do you fit in eating lunch? Because you love it so much, right? What you do is you love it. But to David's point, the multifamily side of it, he's trying to exit, right? He's trying to build more of his business. And business is one of the asset class that's not really considered as an investment, but really is. Running a business is an investment. So I wanted to acknowledge that, David.
No, I appreciate that. But, I think the benefit that Yonah has over a lot of us is that being in the cost segregation space and also having a networking events is that he's probably privy to, operators and have closer relationships with operators than most of us would. He already knows because they're reaching out to him to get, cost seg services. So he already has different insights into the way they operate in the first place versus, us being the average passive investor looking in and just having deals presented to them, but not necessarily knowing the strength of operator. So that's one leg up you have on the rest of us. And then the second part of it is, to your point, as far as making time, I think the challenges with COVID is that you're at home, you travel less, but at the same time, you're also home with your family. So the, opportunity for distraction is a lot higher than if you were outside the home. So.
Right. Absolutely.
I can see that. I mean, for me, I think the challenge is the internet connection. More than anything. You just never know what can happen. Zoom will freeze on you. We've had that happen, David, right? 2 or 3 times, I think. So we were like, ooh, but hey, you go with it, right? That's part of the whole, being an entrepreneur, being a business owner. But to your point, I love that, is that, Yonah loves what he does, and he is in that industry, the space. But I don't necessarily think that it's a one-up thing that he has. I think a lot of us have, our own things that we can bring to the table if we are executing on real estate. But what I do see, Yonah, Yonah's progress, I just love it, because I see like the events, I see, like, what I'm saying, like it becomes a natural conversation. So people are going to go to you. So to those who are breaking into the real estate profession, tuning in, because this is going to be a podcast, don't get discouraged. Even if it's, 2021 and we're still in this COVID thing, there's many different ways. One is attend Yonah's event, because you will definitely meet people. Attend our events because we are kicking that out in January 2021. So, it's all about networking and just starting those conversations. Yeah. Listen to podcasts. I cannot emphasize how much I've learned through everybody's podcast. I mean, I wish I could just binge, like that's all I'm playing in the background, because if you actually dig deep, you will hear all of that wisdom, like just set, like it's giving you a breakthrough. It's all mindset, right? At this point, we use the word mindset a lot, but I think it's about being mindful on what you're doing in your business, in your career, and how you're executing on that. Because I don't know, to me, it's like you can go to these networking events, but if you don't have depth, right? If you don't have the substance to communicate and really have a common goal, it doesn't go anywhere. No one's really going to follow up on that. So what's your take on that, Yonah? Because I know you're sort of a master networker. Your conversations, I'm sure, talks about cost segregation, real estate, but I'm sure you guys talk about books that you've read, little things that maybe are on the side. Like, how has your experience been like with all of these conversations? And, I can use myself as an example. I was really elated to connect with you, probably went into your CRE challenge, not knowing what in the world is this about, but enjoyed that. So, but it's a commitment, right? So take us through that. Like, I mean, how is that like for you on a day-to-day, people trying to message you, maybe, kind of you see what you can do with them. How do you naturally kind of dance with them and say, yeah, let me see what I'm going to do, or maybe I'll shelf this one and revisit it. Just, some tips for those that are looking.
I think it's a combination of a few things. And I think social media in general gives us that opportunity to do that. I mean, the LinkedIn challenge is a great way to just get out there, get out of your comfort zone, and realize the potential and some of the potentials of social media. But the combination is as follows in my mind. Number one is just providing value, like whether that is through creating your own original content or actively engaging and commenting, sharing your wisdom or thoughts on other people's content, because we all have a lot, to share. We have a lot to give. We may be afraid to kind of post it on our own, but to do it in a comment or to help and promote someone else's thing may be easier. So that's first and foremost. And when your focus is, and I think my main focus is just giving and trying to provide and help other people, a lot of it all just falls in place. So I'm not focused, when I'm doing all this networking, connecting with all these people and the messages, I mean, my inbox is full all the time. And so it's a challenge. It definitely is a challenge keeping up with that. And I try to take the time to get to know everyone I connect with on social media, which is very difficult, especially when you're getting into thousands, or tens of thousands. It's difficult. Okay. It takes time and effort. And so it's not just about a numbers game about how many people can I connect with, but how many people can I deeply connect with. And so there's obviously that actually takes time. You have to go through a person's profile, maybe set up a call, like, we have, get to know each other, talk to people and find out what you need, right? Find out what the other person needs, find out and try to discover that. And when you're doing those two things together, I think like it makes everything so much easier because you're not focused on yourself. When you're not focused on yourself, then all of your needs really will fall in place because you become first of all, someone that's trustworthy, right? And you become someone that people get to know because they feel like they know you because you're listening to them. Right. And you're giving and you're at the same time providing all this stuff. So you said, yeah, some guy listened to our podcast interview and felt like, oh, that was a takeaway. That's something that I can now apply to how I want to act or how I want to do things. And that, to me, that's what it's all about, right? That I'm just putting out content. People can get to know me or learn those things at scale that really doesn't exist anywhere else. The more you get to know people, the more and not looking to how I can benefit from this, but the more you actually get to generally know people, understand where they're coming from, the more you can help, like you said, not just provide for them, but actually connect them with other people, because ultimately that's such a huge part of this business is not what you know, but it's who you know. And when you have those type of relationships where you really do know someone. Maybe you work with them, maybe you've seen them work and you can actually recommend them. That's huge. I mean, that can be a game changer for people because they didn't have an in, they didn't have any knowledge of that market or of that endeavor they're getting into, and you've just provided them with an entryway to that can be life changing.
Agreed.
And I was going to say, since, we're not really talking about cost segregation yet, I like this topic because I think a lot of us that's in this space, it becomes a mutually shared network, especially LinkedIn,
Right.
In this case. So let's use this as an example. So for those that are, trying to get their feet in this consistency and showing up, I really like both of your points, because I think the challenge that a lot of, us make or go through is that we overthink how we're going to be out there. Right. So kind of feeling like too sensitive, like, I don't know. Right. So, let me know if you both agree or don't agree, and share your input, because I just want to kind of, highlight it so that if those who are kind of thinking about, well, how do I go on social media? How do I really contact people on LinkedIn? I want to encourage them, because it is one step to, like what to David was experiencing, is the least thing you can do is offer somebody, hey, I know a connection. So if you don't even go on social media, how are you going to gain that connection? Right. So I really find it invaluable to go out there and just present yourself, be yourself. So I think a lot of us tend to overthink, right? Like how we're going to present it, how we're going to be, but eventually scale up and say, yeah, my personal brand is important. You're not going to go all out, use inappropriate topics. Of course, we know all of that. The etiquette, like you said, Yonah, right? The etiquette of showing up, going on Zooms, networking. How do you respond to 1,000 DMs or messages or emails? How do you sort through that? And really just being tactful, right? Like, still open the opportunity to connect, but the being tactful and generous to kind of just say, yeah, I'm watching you on the sidelines and kind of just paying attention and tuning in. You don't necessarily have to always talk to that person, but giving them some kind of support, right? Just kind of cheering on the side. So I like this topic because, a lot of us are going in there, building our personal brand, having a more substantial, I guess, level of content to provide verbally, but also via posts, showing up on podcasts, getting out there to provide value is the key. So what would you recommend if someone is going in these, say, building their personal brand? Because I know you have done that. You went on that and launched Real Estate Connections virtual meetup. That is a brand, right? So Wise Advice, that is a brand. So what would be your launch tip for someone going into that?
And the biggest thing is just to be yourself, right? Be genuine, because then you don't have to overthink things. You don't have to overthink things and think, well, how am I gonna, how are people gonna remember me, right? If you just be yourself, people will remember you for that, right? The right people will remember you, and that's more important than anything else.
Okay, so we're talking about marketing, personal branding, having a professional, output. What is your take on that, Yonah? Because being yourself, to your point, is important.
Absolutely, and I think to David's point, if you have that ability, to how much you can incorporate many different things in your life to your brand, it's all going to connect back, because you're going to connect with different people on different levels. And I think that's why a lot of people do that. And, I learned from Russell Brunson, and he's a great marketer. He has like 5 different pillars or something like that he posts about. Like it's, his business, his podcast, his faith. I forget what it was, like 5 F's, like family, faith, funnels, whatever, something like that, right? So he's constantly balancing all of those things, because you're going to connect with different people on different levels. But essentially, it all comes back to you. And you're talking about personal brand. It's great to have a company brand that you can rely on, right? That you can kind of use them to springboard off of to create something great within that space. And so that's similar to what I do because I work for a big company. True, I've created my own, kind of offshoots, and people recognize me as the cost seg king, right? Or the cost segregation. They think of me. They don't think of Madison Specs, even though Madison Specs has been around for a couple decades and they're the biggest national company. But they think of me. Why? Because I'm the face. I'm the one that people are talking to. I'm the one that people are seeing. And so you can do it. It doesn't matter if you work for a large corporation, you can be that person. And for me, that's kind of the entrepreneur. It's like an intrapreneur, right? Where you're doing it from within the company. You can do that any place you are. Again, it all comes back to you and who you are. And so that's going to shine through. And it will be much easier to, you don't have to overthink, right? How am I going to do the personal branding? But again, you do have to polish it to the extent where you're clear on your message. Okay. And I think that's the most important part. Yes, you have to be you, but you have to be very clear on what your message is. And so that takes time, and that can, go through multiple iterations because you can change that over time, what your message is, depending on who you're trying to reach. Right. But again, it ultimately comes back to when people do recognize you, how are they going to think of you and what are they going to think of you? And that's the key of branding. So when you can get that down, that's good. So yeah, people might think of me and they might think of Weiss Advice, right? Because they've listened to the podcast. And some other people might think, oh yeah, you give this great, group, networking group that I come to. I love that, right? I come every week. But they may not necessarily, those people may not even necessarily know that I do cost segregation, right? For whatever reason. But again, it's all to that point where eventually, once they're in and once they know you for who you are, to one angle, they'll get to the other things. And so that's why it's important to have multiple kind of aspects of you, sharing about, your family or your hobbies or different things to a certain extent. I mean, some people like to do it equally, some will do more or less. But again, it has to come through because this is a people business, right? We're dealing with people, we want to know people, and that's really what it's all about.
Well, I was going to say, you both pointed out really good highlights on there, as far as marketing and being able to separate the company brand to your personal brand. But at the same time, it's all going to lead back to what you're building, which is, of course, being yourself and what you specialize in. And a lot of us can specialize on many different things. I completely understand about building the audience. And I think people that are launching into something like this, and I say the keyword launching is because we are now in this new decade of social media. We may have faced that 10 years ago, because I remember 10 years ago, it wasn't the way it is. We didn't even call it podcast yet. But what I'm trying to get at is using some real scenarios, like speaking with William, who's actually going to be the upcoming keynote speaker. And he talks about video, using video as a way to have a marketing tool. Right. Number two, having your outsourced team, whether you have one person, actually designing how it looks like for you, like whether you're posting it on Facebook or Instagram. So to David's note, you can use tools and do it yourself. And I remember what you said, Yonah, it's like some people can't let that kind of task go. It's like they have that sort of, I'd rather be hands-on and do it. I'm very similar. There's a lot of things I can't let go, even though I do have a small team. So, certain things that where it's not going to vibe with who I am or what I want to do, I usually take over. I usually just do it because I feel like people need to know who I am, like in the process, right? You're not going to have like a pop-up book, right? Like when you're like, guess what, guys, I'm doing cost segregation and now this is my new events. And like, you're not going to have a pop-up book. People are going to see your progress. People are going to see your process. Same thing with David, what he's developing, right? So it's like, you can't expect that someone else or you are just going to have all of that in place. It's a process. So I want to make that as realistic and a reality for a lot of those that are kind of just going, okay, how do I launch into this? Because social media is a huge, huge responsibility.
Hey, Yonah, a quick question. Sorry. With what changes have you noticed in your cost seg business since you've launched Weiss Advice, since you've launched the meetup? What has there been any change? Yes. Yeah.
Um, not. I mean, I haven't seen any real direct like huge growth from it, but it's all adding to growth because and this is a really key tool for really anyone out there, whatever you're doing. If you have a podcast, if you're doing a meetup, any of the type of things, or whether you're being a guest on other people's podcasts, there is a really important thing that happens when you do that. And so for me, this has definitely been a factor, and is that you're building relationships, right? The fact that you can get on a Zoom call and whatever it is, an interview, podcast like we're having now, it's a conversation. But what we're doing is we're strengthening our relationship. We are, getting to know each other better. We're going into some things we maybe agree, disagree on different things. But what that's doing is we have some more ties to one another. So what that does, and that's done for me, is I've connected with and interviewed people that I want to do business with or have done business with and just want to strengthen those relationships. And it's an easy way to give, number one, to give back, right, to your clients, give them a platform that they can kind of voice their opinions and share their story. But at the same time, sometimes you have a prospect that is difficult to reach. Okay. By having a podcast or having like this meetup and you can offer them, here's something I'm going to add value to you. I'm going to give you something. I want you to come on my show to share your story, to promote your thing. For me, I'm not asking for anything in return, but really what that does is that just strengthens your relationship, and they will likely turn back to you and say, well, hey, I know what you do. Maybe we should have a conversation about that, which they never would have done before because you didn't have that way to reach them. Well, guess what? Here's an easy way to reach them. And I've had it work the other way on me as well. If people reach out to me, they want to be a guest on my podcast, and I see exactly what they're doing. But I limit that to a certain extent, but it definitely that has helped. That has definitely helped in that respect. So it hasn't like blown up the business because again, I'm not promoting my business.
Right. I remember you just saying that earlier, which is people know me as, Cost Seg King, but it's not always going to be, that conversation. So I think, I think it's the growth, the inner growth, not just the business growth. I think going on social media and being able to put together your marketing, your personal branding, as I was saying, I was speaking with William Rodriguez, and I'm just so impressed with the quality of his effort to launch. And so to the listeners and viewers that are trying to figure out how to get on that, Yonah is one of those examples too. Like he has his actual, profession. He markets with, Madison. I mean, it's like, you can do that. It's just, you just have to know step by step and always be yourself, right? As you're going into that, because if not, people can see through that. Right, Yonah? Like pretty much that's what you're saying is people want to go on your podcast. They want to use it to market themselves and start their branding. But it's like, there comes to the point where you're like, and to your note, you're right. It enhances the conversation. You're able to tie. So whether you already have an initial, relationship, I think it kind of grows. The key word is growth. So if we're not doing anything that's going towards that, we're not growing. We're going to stay the same. And, seeing that with all of you, I've seen David grow. I mean, how we even got to this show was actually ignited by a post. And, coming from California, we're pretty much in Southern California, we're in Los Angeles. So little things like that can connect people and sort of, we can have differences, but it doesn't mean it stops there, right? It just makes it exciting to grow, to see what we can do on a platform of social media, platform of podcasts. And then with Yonah being a cost segregation specialist, it just opens up more of those conversations, and then now it's kind of, how do you say it, snowballing into this entrepreneurial path for you. That's exciting. How do you take the idea of being an entrepreneur? Like, has that kind of hit you and, in your mind, you're like, yeah, you know what, maybe I will, in 5 years from now, really be that. Like, have you ever thought about that? I'm just curious. Like full time, I'm going to leave the day work, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think we discussed this briefly before, but yeah, just to reiterate that, that's really my biggest struggle, because I enjoy very much what I do, and I'm in a lot of ways an entrepreneur, but going off on my own, or partnering with other people, that's going to take time. And I know that I'll be successful if I do commit to that. But because I love what I do, I don't feel the push
Right.
to jump into it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yona, I wanted to skip back a couple minutes ago where you mentioned in the conversation that using, the meetup groups, the podcast, if anything, it's a way to essentially create branding. So when you are talking to prospects or you're trying to contact prospects, it provides validation for the reason why they should talk to you. And I think
Mhm.
that's really big. And I think that's where the
Yes.
distinguishing factor is between somebody, you know, between choosing somebody else or one of your peers, whether it's at Madison Specs or whether it's at another cost seg firm. The branding itself is the value that you bring, or it's the way that you distinguish yourself from your peers. And I think that's something really important to point out. Whereas if it doesn't necessarily have the, direct tangible manifestation and, business right away, if anything, it's your calling card. It's
Right.
what distinguishes you from your peers. And then, yeah, to your point, it's getting into multifamily investing full time. If you love your job, you're already an entrepreneur because you're a salesperson for a cost sales person, specialist. So as a salesperson, you're already an entrepreneur. So the question is, do you want to be an entrepreneur in a full time entrepreneur in another space?
Right.
Um,
And I'll add on to something you just said before. I would say that everyone should try this out. Okay. And I know a lot of times if you're a salesperson or you're, an entrepreneur, and we all in sales to a certain extent, is we're trying to reach people, we're trying to contact people, we're trying to spread our own brand awareness. But if you take out a certain amount of time, okay, and you spend that not trying to reach people to pitch your own product, right, or to pitch whatever you're selling, if you literally just make a certain amount of time every day to just reach out to people, and just get to know them, and don't mention anything or even bring up anything about it, even if they bring it up, kind of brush it on the table. Oh yeah, right. But and I can't tell you how many times that I've heard the phrase. Literally happens all the time. I'll be in a conversation with someone. I'll be like, "Well, I don't have any need, for cost segregation right now, but when I do, you are the first person that I will go to." It's not because I've told them anything about that. It's not because it's because establishing that presence, of number one, that you're not just, you're trying to push what you have on anyone else. And you are providing, like we said very much earlier, just continually creating content and providing that information so that people, they do know what you have to offer. It may not be relevant to them now, but that's what branding's all about. When they do think about it, right, they think of you.
Those are some great points, and I think that if I could ask anything of you, or if even ask anything of Jonah in the future, I'd like to be able to see like a webinar on how to take a conversation off LinkedIn. How do you get someone to have genuine conversation or connections with you off LinkedIn? Because connecting with someone, at least in my space, has been, and to Jonah's point, is relatively easy. Being able to take the conversation off LinkedIn. I know like certain things that you shouldn't do. You shouldn't DM somebody if you don't have an existing relationship with them, or not use that as your sole strategy. At the
Right.
least, you should at least follow up with an email to the person. Many times LinkedIn, they have an email connected to their profile. You should reach out to them via email. If it's somebody you really want to get in contact with, maybe put a phone call out. But it really becomes a challenge because everybody's time is tight now, is to be able to, one, build relationships with people genuinely off LinkedIn. That's something I'd love to see some type of webinar or however on in the future.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, that's really what it's all about. So there's definitely a strategy there, and we can maybe touch on that, or follow up with that.
Well, that these topics are usually my common conversations, with some of the people that's, in our mutual LinkedIn circle and network. And it's interesting because they've pointed out a lot of these. I think the problem that I recognize and observe is more of what happens to the people that are messaging you and then they don't follow up. That's the first, right? Usually the etiquette is, oh, thanks for connecting. And then they ask you a question and then you respond back and then no follow up. So this conversation was actually quite fresh a couple of days ago. And it was a fun conversation. And I said, you know what, that is actually something we can't control. If people don't want to follow up and don't want to send the next message, it is what it is. So you focus on the people that are engaging with you. And the question is, how do we continue growing the engagement? So I love this. And I did mention to you, David, about, thinking of doing something like that, almost like what Yonah is doing with the CRE challenge. And it's more of engagement. So would love to have you join us. I mean, it's a really intimate, opportunity as well, because we want to make sure it's real content, real engagement, and building relationships in and outside of our DMs. So, I love this subject. I mean, I think it's an endless subject for 2021 because we are in a Zoom life. It's virtual. I don't know if you guys are missing the in person, but being in California, we do have curfews and sort of this phase where, a lot of things are halted, the dining in, and I think the dining out is not encouraged now, I think after 9 p.m. So, those little things that we have to kind of shift around has changed our mentalities, our approach to life, not taking things for granted. So, just like this moment, Yonah, we're not taking it for granted. We're grateful for you to be here and share this. My gosh, it's like, it's not even cost segregation, but, people know where to find you. How can they not find you? But if it came down to a conversation, I think you are one person to talk about this, the whole engagement, the building of relationships. I mean, wow, like it's, to me, it's like finding the right people that's going to present that, to somebody else that's totally new. I think, I've seen that, in you where you can be straight up and say, this is how you begin, this is what you do. You just begin and go from there. It's kind of like, you don't need to outsource that, right? It's all about you. So what are your last thoughts or words for those, thinking of really engaging deeply into this, space of social media, virtual networking, building their business, whether they're brokers, realtors, investors, multifamily, syndication, all the works?
There's so much information out there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? You're talking about podcasts and books and so much valuable content available out there. And that's what I do. Like I'm not a marketing person but I just picked up on things that I saw people that were in the marketing space doing. And I know they're successful because that's their bread and butter, which means they're only doing those things and using those specific strategies because it's working. If they weren't working, they wouldn't be using them. So that's for me, the biggest tip that I have is find people who are in the social marketing or space, follow them, watch what they're doing, incorporate some of those things into how you can do things, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel for that. So one just, if I'll make two suggestions, Gary Vaynerchuk is huge. I mean, that's Gary V.
Love him.
Yeah, and his book is really a lot of what we've been talking about today. Is the philosophy of just the jab, 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 right hook, where you're just giving before ever, right, making any sort of offer whatsoever. So that book is incredible because it's hammering down this point. He has an article that he wrote, which is called the $1.80 strategy. And I did a version of that. You can find the article on my LinkedIn page. It's called the 18 cents challenge. And what it is, basically, it takes the premise that you have to add your 2 cents. You have to add your thoughts, your comments to engage with other people on their own posts on social media. So he was doing on LinkedIn, not on LinkedIn, he was doing it on Instagram and on Twitter, like adding his 2 cents, right? Putting his comment on. He did this like consistently for a matter of I think a year or two. Every single day, consuming 90 pieces of content a day and adding a thoughtful comment. So that's his 2 cents times 90 is $1.80. So that's crazy. think that's humanly possible, even if you're doing it for, 8 hours a day, which he was. But for me, I said, well, yeah, we can boil this down to, let's cut it down by 10. Let's do 18 cents. Let's do 9 pieces of content a day that you can consume, consciously make an effort to find people that you want to engage with them. And so I have an article on my page that describes the process of doing that and how incredible that is. So that's one very practical takeaway anyone can take from this.
I do like his work. I actually tune in his live when I can. I mean, a lot of people, may not see that, but I think you have to dig deeper. Like when you hear stuff about, oh, you can do this and market yourself. I think there's a lot more to uncover. And I think that's what's happening, is that there's some fluff out there. So it's finding, like you said, it's finding the right, person that you want to follow and see what they're doing. And obviously, we're here on YouTube, we're here on LinkedIn, we're here on Instagram, we're here on Facebook. So again, I think that's, for me, this is wow. Like, this is great. It just kind of re-emphasized on what I was believing in. So definitely grateful for that. But David, in closing.
Yeah, no, what I was just also going to say to add to that, I think, is that when you're thinking about content and when you're thinking about commenting on things, I think it's really important to think about your why. I mean, whatever you do is really to just be really focused and intentional about your why. Like, why are you posting something? It's not to boost the algorithm in LinkedIn or whatever social media forum you're using, but to think about why are you posting this? What is it going to add to somebody's day? Are you just posting without commentary, or make sure you're posting with commentary? Or when you're making comments on somebody's post, not to be posted just to be contrary, but to actually add something of valuable thought to it. It's just really being intentional when you do, post content. I think that's really important to add to that.
I think the holistic approach, I mean, I definitely don't engage unless I'm inspired. But the algorithm, though, is quite important, because if you are posting on certain times, LinkedIn has changed massively for the past 10 years. And Instagram has changed. So I'm not really as, excited about it right now. I haven't yet, explored TikTok. So, I mean, of course, this is a whole new topic, more technical, because algorithm, it does matter. Just because LinkedIn is huge, right? So just because you posted and you featured it on top of your page, it doesn't mean everybody's going to pick it up. So that is important, but it's very technical. But like you're saying, the holistic approach, be inspired. Don't post just random stuff. Actually have a purpose. And to Yona's point is, be yourself, give value, because at the end of the day, you don't have to talk about cost segregation to somebody. They'll just remember you, that, the go-to, just like to David.
Exactly.
They're going to remember you for, being a multifamily investor that exited that. And now you want to help other investors, realize what they need to be doing going into that business. Just like with me, they can come to me and say, how do I launch something? How do I structure this business? So they're going to remember you in those conversations. So we should be using this platform and inspire the conversation. So in a nutshell, we got to the point. We're probably going to have many more conversations like this, Yonah. So you're welcome here anytime. Appreciate, everything that I've been seeing on your, virtual meetups, and just content is on fire. And loving your podcast. So congratulations on that. And you can find all of us on LinkedIn. Yonah Weiss, Wise Advice Podcast, David H. Evans, Jona Lemons at Launch Your Wealth. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you, Yonah, for
Thank
coming
you,
on.
Yonah. Oh my gosh, I could have went on this whole thing, but it just felt like, wow, like we were going to talk about cost segregation, but I guess everybody's experiencing the business growth, challenge and the experiences. I think naturally it went to that. And you are one person that everybody's seeing. They're trying to basically say, how is Yonah doing that? Like, it just seems so natural, right, David? Like, it just seems so natural about you.
What I wanted to just say is that it has a lot to do with time blocking, right? So I definitely set time where I know I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and I have a schedule, and I have Calendly, which I use a lot. So, most of my business is incoming, which means people are reaching out to me. And that, that took time over, a long period of time to develop that. But what that has done is now with the help of Calendly, you want to talk about this? So click this link. Let's talk about it, right? You want to, whatever, talk about a property. So here's a form you can fill out. We can take a look at that, et cetera. It's very easy. A lot of it's automated. And so it automatically gets into the schedule. So I know. And so I have other times set aside where I know, certain days of the week, certain times during those days, I'm free to do podcasting, right? Other times I'm free to, between that, in between the meetings and things like that, I check email. So it's really just about setting those times and keeping to those schedules. So I have plenty of time for all that stuff, even though I probably could automate more and have more help to just streamline processes even more.
The Calendly or any form of calendar, Google Calendar, really helps. So I think because David is at that point, he's launching into his next phase, right, of his business. So being, in the real estate business, having to do his marketing. So I really believe it was relevant for him to hear it from someone like you that's been doing it. So it's amazing to see how naturally, how you're doing it so naturally,
right?
I think the bandwidth will just come naturally, like I so agree because I use my calendar like it's I can't live without it, because if I don't have that, I won't know what's. And I like the fact that your output, it's all about output when you have that calendar, right? Because you're now going back to it, going, okay, I need to call this person back. I need to email this person back. So your output.
Well, a lot of it's automated, and that's the great part about
right.
it. Is that person, it will just show up in the calendar, and
So that's the key word, David, is automate. Yeah, I mean, Yona
Absolutely.
is a really good example for someone like you. Because you're very similar. Like you work with a company, but you have to build your own as well. So
Yeah.
Right. So for example, like I'm supposed to be writing an article for Bigger Pockets. So I need to
block time. Yeah.
I need to block off time to do that, where I'm not on LinkedIn. I'm not, doing
Right.
anything else. I don't have any scheduled phone calls. Otherwise it's just not going to happen. It's
right. It's never going to happen if you don't.
It'll never happen.
Right. Like you said, David, you got to be intentional. I was just telling David this morning on a quick chat, I said, we're not going on vacation now for the holidays. So I'm going to work. So I'm going to use that time to write. I'm going to use that time to convert things into podcasts and, kind of just make it time, blocking that time. Right. So I think it's very important when you're juggling that bandwidth. And that's what I hear 90% of the time.
And working from home, it ends up being even more of a challenge. It's like, before you can go in the office, you can stay at the office, you can stay at the office as much as you need to, but now it's just like working from home. You can have plans, and I don't know how to use, there's a saying, man plans, God laughs, and that tends to seem to be like the sentiment in my house quite often. So it's just really being and especially in an environment with COVID being restricted where you can go now, you have to even be a lot more laser focused, because you can't say, well, I'm going to just go to Starbucks and work. I'm going to just go to my office and work, because you have restrictions, at least here, as far as where you can go, so you even have to be a lot more intentional.
I feel like I was in your phase, 10 years ago. So I have empathy for that. I totally understand. It's going to be the biggest challenge you have as a business owner, as an entrepreneur launching. It's always going to be your biggest challenge. So it may take you slower, but hang in there, because you're going to see your progress. Just keep going.
And full caveat here, I don't watch a lot of TV, and I'm not on social media, and I'm not on social media that much primarily outside of LinkedIn. So it's not like those type of distractions. Primary distraction I have is like a weekly bike ride. But outside of that, a lot of it is kind of focused to
this. I think you need to automate. I think you need to have somebody else do the other things that you're needing to do.
That's on the schedule for 2021. You're definitely right there.
All about business growth, and business growth is attached to you growing.
Oh, yeah.
Always remember that it's a mind shift. And that's why I call it mindful. You have to be mindful of what you need to be doing, what you want in life, whether it's this 1 month life or 10 months into the 2021. Because if you don't do that and you're not mindful, you're like a hamster in a wheel. Honestly, I'll tell you that right now.
I
You
feel
know,
it. I understand.
yeah. Well, that's why I was candidly sharing with you on our text. Yona, I was telling David, I said, I have my family support because 10 years ago, I was in the background. I was doing the work behind the scenes. So now it's going to be opposite because I want to be an active investor, right? So I want to roll up my sleeves and pick up a hammer, you know, so to speak, right? So that's going to entail bandwidth. And you're going, well, what else is, going on with that? Well, you have to continuously grow your social media, right? And I just came back to LinkedIn after many years of not so, right? Because I didn't find the need. I was behind the scenes doing,
And
so
and thank you definitely for kind of being the consistent motivation. I don't know for you, Jonah, but for me to post and to add value, even when like the CRE challenges, it always kind of it ramps you up to and
yeah,
reminds you. But honestly, being able to be mindful and do it on a regular basis
yes,
is key. But every time you bring the CRE challenge, it brings a lot of engagement. So
Right.
thank you.
yeah, it's
Okay.
good stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
All
there
right.
you go.
So well, yeah.
It's been a pleasure, guys. I do have to run,
Yeah.
but
Thank you, Yona.
let's
Great
definitely catch up again soon.
conversation. Appreciate it. We'll see you soon.
Yes. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good one.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Oh.